Hi folks, it's good to be with you. Love to everybody out there. And we're going into our second part on the Birmingham University Quranic Fragments by J. Smith. And I want to just talk about a few things about the dating of the Quran and these fragments. Now, when you're looking at the scholarship on the dating of the Quran, it's important to remember what is called the bell curve. And what it is if you've got, say, 6 universities that do dating on the Quran, say Quran manuscript, the Sana manuscript, or the Mingana collection that we're looking at here. Say you've got these 6 universities. One will say it was 600 AD when the Quranic manuscript was produced. Some will say 7th century AD. Some in the middle will say 750, 650, 630, etc. Right? So you get all these different dates of the different universities, maybe 6. And then what you do is scholars take what is called the bell curve. You take the middle one, and that's how you kind of come to a scholarly consensus on the dating of the Quran. You take the bell curve. Now the bell curve, when you take a number of these manuscripts, like the Sana manuscript or the Mingana collection, the bell curve kind of comes probably just before Muhammad. So how can manuscripts that Muhammad is supposed to be inspired exist before Muhammad? It's a big question. Now, the second point I want to mention is the scholars, scholars who talk for the BBC on this issue of the Birmingham manuscript. It's clear that very often scholars will say things very dogmatically but don't have a real strong historical base, and they accept the Muslim tradition. Now, why would they do that? Because when you look at historical sources of Islam, the early historical sources from a Western academic point of view, they don't stand up to any intellectual scrutiny. There's a lot of problems with the historical data of Islam. It's late information. Like Bukhari comes 200 years after Muhammad, and in those Bukhari's hadiths, there's information about how the Quran formed, and the Muslim Sunnis take that information and come up with some kind of orthodox view. But what they don't tell you is it's 200 years after Muhammad, and then in top of that you get your first volume in like the 11th century of Bukhari. So in other words, this data is not very helpful data. And it's data that's been politicized and can be manipulated, and has been manipulated to suit a particular point of view. So what I'm saying is you will get some scholars speaking dogmatically about the dates of the Quran, saying this is Uthmanic, or this is one of the earliest Qurans, and it proves the Quran has been preserved, etc. This is just like dishonest scholarship, because if you know the historical sources, you can't be dogmatic like that, to say things like that the Quran has been preserved, because the historical data is so bad and actually so incriminating against Islam, showing you how the Quran has been edited, politicized, etc. So the point is, beware of scholars that are very confident and dogmatic about saying the Quran has not changed, and these are Western scholars. Ask yourself why they're saying that. Very often you need to know that some of these universities are supported by Qatar and Saudi Arabia, and also so the universities want finance from Islam to keep going, to do the university departments, run the university departments. But on top of that, we have real issues of academic integrity, where you have leftist and political correct scholars who are frightened to critique Islam, because they live under a post-colonial guilt complex, and they just fear criticizing Islam in any way. So they're soft on Quranic textual criticism, and they will be in favour of the Muslim point of view, which lacks any real historical data. So the question is, how come then we have some Qurans that seem to be older than even Muhammad himself? Now, one has to say that this dating of the Qurans has to be held with caution. Even though it might be said they're 95% accurate, there are some top scholars, really top Western scholars, that actually doubt the dating system. So that's just important to remember. So it's not all confident and hunky-dory and pinned down as the academic world would suspect, wants to present to you, especially the Islamic academic world. Secondly, it could be that some of these sources, some of these Qurans that come before Muhammad, are really just borrowed from other sources. So you had other scriptures, other literature, and they were just put on these texts, and then the Quran was shaped and doctored to fit in with these ancient texts. So, for example, you have the Tayammum in Surah 4:43, copied from Jewish scripture, the Talmud. The breathing life into birds in Surah 2:260, 3:49, Surah 5:110, copied from Coptic books. Horace Azazel, Surah 44, verse 54, learned from the foreigners in Mecca. Harut and Marut, Surah 2:102, from the Armenian books. Harut and Marut are in control of wind and rain. Allah's throne above water, Surah 11:7, from the Jewish tradition. Malik, the ruler of hell, Surah 43, verse 77, from the Jews. Malik, Leviticus 18:21, 22, etc. Seven heavens in Surah 2:29, 41 to 12, Surah 41 to 12, adopted from the Sanskrit scriptures of the Hindus. Mary giving birth under the trunk of a tree, Surah 19:23, copied from the Gospel Infancy and apocryphal Christian Gospel. Infants Jesus talking, Surah 3:46, Surah 19:30-31, Surah 19:33, copied from the Gospel of Infancy. Description of paradise and hell, there are many verses, see the section on Solomon the Persian, copied from the magicians, Zoroastrians and the Hindus. Jesus not killed, Allah lifted up Jesus, Surah 3:35, Surah 4:157, 158, copied from the Gospel of Barnabas. The story of Josephus, Surah 12, copied from the Midrash, a Jewish scripture. The story of Solomon and Sheba, Surah 21:78-82, Surah 27:17-19, Surah 27:22-23, copied from the Haggadah, a Jewish scripture. Kings, chapter 10, verse 1. The original Quran is kept in heaven, Surah 43:4, Surah 85:21-22. The Talmud says the Torah is preserved tablet in heaven. Angel of death, Azrael and Azil, Malkul and Malut in Surah 6:61, Surah 7:37, Surah 32:11, adopted from the Jewish and the magician Zoroastrian scriptures. The uncannily, though, the Quran itself asserts that the infidels of Mecca knew that Muhammad had copied the Quran from various sources, especially from the Jewish scriptures, and that was why Allah had to admonish the polytheists for calling Muhammad a copycat. This is revealed in verse 28-48. So it could be that the reason why some of the Qurans are being dated earlier than Muhammad, not the ink but the parchment, it could be that actually the Quran was written before Muhammad, most of it, because it came from other sources like the infancy Gospels, the Talmud, Hindu scriptures, and that's what we're seeing. It's interesting to note that we don't have in these very ancient Qurans full Qurans. That's something that the Muslims don't tell you, something that the Muslim apologists don't tell you. So we don't have really early complete Qurans. Okay, there are verses missing. So that means you've got to do textual criticism. You've got to look at manuscripts. It's not just about the chain of narration or verbally oral tradition passing it on. If there are verses missing in these ancient Qurans, you have to get these ancient Qurans together and do textual criticism. And the Muslims, scholars today, won't do that. Corpus Quranicum is a brilliant organisation. They're doing sterling work on German manuscripts, so go and have a look at what they're doing. They have a massive database on the Quran, and you can research and study for hours and hours there. So we've still got more to do, still got more to read, so I hope this has been an interest to you. So we'll continue.